Hey there. So this week we have an all-star lineup of saints that are remembered and celebrated in our Catholic tradition. So this past Monday was the feast day of Saint Lawrence, who was a deacon and a martyr in Rome. Yesterday was the feast of Saint Clare of Assisi, the founder of the Poor Clares and companion of Saint Francis. And this upcoming Friday is the feast of Maximilian Kolbe, who is a Polish Franciscan who was killed at Auschwitz. So while each of these saints lived and ministered in very different times and contexts, there's a common thread that kind of joins them all together, and it's this idea of poverty or reaching out to those who are marginalized. So St. Lawrence, when Christians were persecuted under the Roman Emperor Valerian, was told to turn the riches of the church over to the Roman Empire. And so upon hearing this, he sold whatever he could, gave the proceeds to the poor and to the sick, and then standing before the Roman prefect, brought a delegation of the poor, the sick, the lame, stating that these indeed were the riches of the church. And it didn't go over so well, and he was promptly put to death after that. St. Clare, inspired by Francis of Assisi, gave away the privileges of her family's high social position so as to better imitate the life of poverty that Jesus lived during his earthly ministry, a literal imitation of Christ. The religious order that she helped found, the Poor Clares, continue on this path to imitate the poverty of Christ to this day. And Maximilian Kolbe, a Polish Franciscan friar, was arrested and imprisoned for hiding Jewish refugees during the Holocaust. Detained at Auschwitz, he volunteered to take the place of another inmate who was randomly selected to be killed because this other inmate had a family. The last years of Maximilian's life and his death were ultimately spent in close association and solidarity with the Jewish community, one of the most persecuted and marginalized groups in history. So for someone who grew up in the Catholic Church, these stories and the stories of so many other great saints in our tradition have been part of my religious education since I was a kid. And I've been catechized enough that the idea of the poor and the marginalized, the idea that these groups have a preferential place in the church's mission and ministry is not a new idea for me. The church from its earliest days has been committed to serving Christ and the poor, which is one of the things I love so much about being Catholic. And yet it's often easy in my own life to have the church turn into a code for someone else. If I identify the church with bishops, priests, religious sisters, and missionaries, then in some sense I'm able to let myself off the hook for having this mission to minister to the poor and to be in solidarity with the poor. And ultimately that's a lie. I am part of the church. You are part of the church. Every baptized person shares this responsibility to share our lives with those who are vulnerable and marginalized. And so how might you and I take this call to be a church for the poor? How do we take that seriously? Name them. Gustavo Gutierrez, who is a Peruvian theologian and priest, offers this challenge. He says, "So you love the poor? Name them." It's an invitation to enter into the lives of the poor so that they're no longer just impersonal parts of a larger group, the poor. They're individuals created by God with names and stories, hopes and desires and struggles, just like you and me. The challenge is to put yourself in a situation of authentic encounter with another person. In this space, love becomes a relationship instead of simply being an abstract idea of serving and ministering to the poor. So, do you know the names of the poor? If not, my challenge for you is to get to know the name and story of at least one person who is poor, vulnerable, or marginalized in some way. The wisdom of our tradition says that those encounters are privileged means for encountering Jesus. Thanks. Have a good week.